Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in for our webinar today. And we're going to make this a super informative and productive session for you all. I am Arsh. I work as a developer experience engineer at Okteto. And I have my friend Richard here with me. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Ash. Thanks for having me along. My name's Richard Weirasinger. I'm a senior principal at Slalom, which is a consulting company based out of New Zealand. Um, I'm also a HashiCorp ambassador, and so basically I help customers um, manage and maintain Terraform providers. So good to be here and having a chat with you this morning. At least morning for me. So.
Yeah, fun fact about this webinar, we have like people from three different time zones. Like I am based in India, Richard is in Australia. It's like morning for him, late night for me, and um, people running this behind the scenes are in midday. So fun stuff. Anyways, let's get started. I'll pull over my slides and we'll take a look today at how you can unify your development and production environments using Terraform and Okteto. So before we get started with that, I want to give a quick introduction about what Terraform is, and just for people who do not know. So Terraform is an infrastructure as code tool, and what that basically means is Terraform allows you to define all your infrastructure components, be it like storage buckets, databases, on any cloud provider as code. The benefit of this approach is that instead of having to go to the UI to manually recreate stuff, you can just have it in a Terraform file, and then anyone can apply that file. And as long as they have the credentials, they can replicate your infrastructure in their environment. I'll hand it over to Richard, who is a HashiCorp ambassador, because he'll be able to give much more nuance about Terraform and its benefits.
Thanks, Ash. So yeah, it's super interesting, right? I mean, we've got to go back in history a little while to when sort of Terraform launched, and at the time there were a lot of homegrown solutions for managing infrastructure. It's usually script based or procedural, and HashiCorp took a slightly different approach to how to manage infrastructure, and essentially used a more um, sort of definition as code approach, which is we want to know what the infrastructure looks like, and we define it in some sort of template. And the way Terraform works essentially is more of a declarative model, which slightly changed the way most of the previous iterations were run. And the other thing HashiCorp did, which I think was probably quite clever at the time, was to open source this. So they kind of developed a plugin model, which allowed the open source community to get behind Terraform and basically build many integrations with Terraform. And that's where the third point there, where Terraform supports various cloud providers, on-premise and multi-cloud environments. And I think even more than that, it supports anything that creates resources. So whether it be infrastructure, sort of tooling, or other products such as Okteto. We'll get a bit further into that a little bit later on in here in this thing. But essentially, anything that creates resources, Terraform can technically manage it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What one of my favorite things is just this feature of being able to replicate things so easily. Like it's a game changer because like it takes away the process of manually knowing how to interact with the cloud provider, because with so many cloud providers offering so many services, you cannot expect like one individual to have all the knowledge related to that service, right? Because let's say you're launching a database, you don't know what things to configure, like what space you want to give it, what permissions you want to give it. All of that task can now be just like automated by like your AWS expert in your team, and they can just write a Terraform file, hand it to you, and all you have to do is just apply that file and create that infrastructure. So that is one of my favorite bits about Terraform.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's worth just diving into that a little bit. I mean, I'm ex AWS, so I'm an AWS specialist. I've been knee deep in AWS for actually since I think there was 16 services on the console. So I can remember being able
wow.
to
Yeah.
legitimately know every single one. And the
I-
thing is, that even as an AWS expert, you can't do these things correctly every single time
Everything. Yeah.
without some automation. And following on from that, once you've created, as you say, once you've created something, you want to make it reusable. and accessible to many people. And so what that means, or accessible to many consumers. What that means is this declarative model, I do believe, really helps with that. It really helps with sort of being able to understand what you're looking at in sort of a simple, mostly readable fashion with some experience. And it definitely comes to that last point around facilitating collaboration and automating infrastructure with repeatability. So I think it is it's an interesting kind of
Yeah.
point.
And I like that Octeto also is built on the same principles and we have the same motivation, just extending that to the entire development environments, just like Terraform did it for infrastructure. So, just this idea of being able to automate the replication of an environment or infrastructure, I find that very fascinating personally. I'll let you explain a bit about Terraform's architecture so that people know how it works behind the scenes.
Yeah, so I thought this was an interesting slide to put in here from a conversational point of view around how does Terraform actually allow the extensibility. So essentially, there's this Terraform concept of a Terraform core, which is the actual engine that manages um, the actual dependency models and how it actually calls each of the plugins. So the plugins in the middle are the bit that's basically created by the open source community mostly. HashiCorp actually manages some, but the majority are created by the open source community. We'll talk a bit about that later. Um, and basically, I think the interesting thing about the plugins is um, by building that plugin architecture, what they've allowed is virtually anyone can come up. I mean, if you want to automate your gate, you can automate your gate using Terraform. So there's a lot of options you can do, and so anything you can really think about from a automation point of view, as long as you have an API available, you can pretty much automate it. Cool. And on to the next one, I guess this is the point here is that there's over 3,000 Terraform providers in the public registry. So that's an interesting statistic. I think from a infrastructure as code landscape, there isn't many competitors really for Terraform in this space because there is such a large uptake and already existing level of providers. And by the way, it's not all good news because there is also a level of quality, and some of them are not the best quality. And I'm sure if you've been in this community for any length of time, and I think most of your viewers or Teto viewers are probably in that community, you'll know that there's actually good and bad providers, some that haven't been maintained that well. So, but there's still a very a large base, and realistically, the more it gets used, usually the more effort there is to maintain. And so it's kind of like if it's used, it's probably well maintained and it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, that aspect really is like pretty cool that like all of this like different open source projects as they gain popularity, their users end up requesting like we need a Terraform provider for this, and I think that has now become like a metric for successful adoption of your project when you have your users asking that like we want to automate creation of this, like give us a Terraform provider. So I've seen in Mata here like they have their policy as code Keverno, and like that's a pretty cool project, and I didn't know that now they have a Terraform provider. So interesting community, interesting things happening. Let's talk about GitOps with Terraform a bit.
Yeah, sure. So as time has gone on, I guess the reality is the promise of Terraform is that you can, because of this plugin model, you can consume any cloud. You can also consume it doesn't really, as long as you're using a Git sourced repository type style option, then it does lend itself well with additional tooling to wrap around GitOps with Terraform. And I just thought I'd mention it here because I thought later on I can do a bit of a demo to showcase how that might look from a um, adding a layer of control over the top of Terraform. So, most people are probably familiar with Terraform at the command line, and you can run your own, you control it yourself essentially within your authentication abilities. So, what we can do is wrap it with a product called Terraform Cloud, which is a Hashi offering to add some role based access control or some approval mechanisms to stop the process during phases of the GitOps lifecycle.
Yeah, I've been like reading a lot more and trying out things with GitOps. And GitOps principles basically advocate that you store everything in a Git repository so that your configuration is just like trackable via commit history, and it is easily reproducible. And I think this is a great segue for me to talk about Octeto, because our development environments are built on that same principle. Like, as we'll soon see in the demo we have prepared for you, you have an Octeto manifest where you define how your entire environment gets spun up, and that includes deploying your microservices, creating any resources you want by running any Terraform scripts you have, and all those kind of things. You store that information in a Git repository, and then it is there as a central hub for all your developers to spin an environment for. So, for those of you who do not know, Octeto is a platform for development experience automation, and we believe in providing platform engineers a way to enable a seamless development experience for developers who are building cloud native applications. What this means is that we configure production like cloud development environments which are available to developers in the click of a button. And the part I love most, and the part which fits in with Terraform for this webinar, is the automation of creating all your development resources. If you have been coding any modern like cloud native application, it is more than likely that your application is not just like a front end or a back end microservices. Applications now are including storage components like buckets or relation RDS databases or messaging queues. And all of these components are there on some cloud infrastructure. It could be GCP, it could be AWS. The automatic question arises is when you ask your developers to add an endpoint or do something on the front end, add some error handling for when you are not able to store things in a bucket. How do they do that, right? Like, if you do not provide them with the access to a bucket, like, let's suppose, so we'll be working with a to-do list application in this, which backs up your to-dos. And let's say you're a developer who has been tasked with adding some error handling functionality to this. How do you actually do that when you cannot mimic the response from the bucket easily, right? So it is solving problems like these. It is providing developers with a realistic environment that Octeto takes care of during the development phase. And the part I love is that you can use the same tools, be it Helm, Terraform, whatever you use to deploy your services, to create your infrastructure in production. You can leverage those existing scripts during development as well. One of the cool features we released this year was the external resources, and these external resources include the things I was talking to you about: buckets, databases, queues, or anything you want, any infrastructure component which is part of your application. We allow you to automate that creation for development environments. And what this ensures is that there's a consistency between dev and prod, while at the same time taking away headache from developers. So you as platform engineers can do a one-time configuration of how things should get spun up, and you can add that configuration in an Octeto manifest, store it in a Git repository, and then all your developers have to do is log into Octeto, just launch their dev environment, and they'll have all of these resources created for themselves. So it is this automation of infrastructure and development environments which Octeto takes care of. Before we proceed to the demo, I would like to see if there are any questions.
Actually,
Mm,
while we're waiting for questions, I
yeah.
like the idea of allowing people to use their existing investment, because if you've built a bunch of capability or a bunch of, if you've invested some time building modules in Terraform, and then you can add them into Octeto, that's a really good advantage to having to rebuild everything just to deploy stuff which you've already created. So I think that's a really key feature. Nice to see.
Yeah, and it ensures like a separation of concerns as well, because now the people, like the developers, they don't have to, like each time run to the DevOps personnel or the sysadmin person and ask them, how do I apply this Terraform script? Can you give me this? Because now you just automate that entire process. So I have a demo prepared for this, which shows how you can do this. I'm gonna bring down the slides and share my browser now. So I first want everyone to visualize like the end result. Give me a second. Yeah. I first want everyone to visualize what the end result of this experience you are able to create with the help of Octeto for your developers looks like. Once you have configured all the automation and put it in place, all developers need to do when they want to develop their app is just go to Octeto, log in, click launch dev environment, and you can have that application configured as part of our Octeto catalog. And developers can simply just select it and click the launch button. Now, what this will do is you'll see that it will deploy all the microservices which are part of this application. It will run the Terraform scripts and take care of replicating your production environment during development. Now, the first time you run this process, you'll see that it is building all the microservices and creating the S3 bucket, which is a part of this application. And for that, it is running a Terraform file. Now, you can use the same Terraform file you might be using to create this application in production. Now, the first time this process would take some time. So I have this already run. In fact, it's done completing here as well. But if I go back to my other namespace which you can deploy this application to, and that's another cool part, that you can easily replicate multiple versions of your application to play with. But once you have everything deployed, this gives you access to endpoints where you can access different components. So you see, as part of the create S3 bucket step, it created an S3 bucket for us, and it's giving us the console link for the AWS console where I can go and visit my S3 bucket. So if I go there, you'll see an S3 bucket was created, and this is meant to be an ephemeral resource. It's only meant to be there as long as I'm developing, because as soon as I delete this environment, I have also automated the deletion of this resource, and that's as simple as running Terraform destroy. The best part about this feature is that when you enable this, you ensure that there is no misuse of resources, or there is no cognitive load on developers or you as platform engineers to keep a track of all the development resources, because their deletion is automated. So as soon as someone is working, all they need to do is just destroy all resources part of their namespace and it'll be done. So apart from the S3 bucket, you also have endpoints where you can actually visit your application. So if you see that I have this endpoint where my application is live, and this is a to-do list application, so I can add a to-do which says do a webinar today and learn about Terraform. And what this application does is it allows the users to take a backup of the to do by hitting the save button. So once you do that and you go back to your AWS console, you'll see that the to dos get exported as a JSON file. So this is a exactly working replica of my application. And now when developers want to actually code this application, all they have to do is just go to their favorite code editor. I like VS Code, so I'm using that. And here they can change any code. So the name of our application wasn't the most well thought out one. I find Octeto to do to be very hard to pronounce. So I'll just change this to my to do list, and all I have to do is hit save. Once I hit save, you'll see that I have an Octeto up session running. It detected my changes, and since this is React, it already built the application. And when I go back to my browser and I hit refresh, you'll see that the name of the application changed. And this is a very simple change, but you can change anything. You can add error handling based on what response you get from the bucket. You can add a new endpoint to the API to do more things with the bucket, like maybe add a date timestamp. And all of this developers can do without having to take care of, manually deploying that application, or knowing AWS, or knowing how to configure things in the console. Isn't that pretty cool?
Yeah, not bad. I'm pretty impressed. Have you got customers using this already, Ash, or is this a brand new feature?
External resources was launched in the middle of this year, and we already have customers who are leveraging this not just for Terraform, but they are doing innovative things. They're using like MongoDB Atlas databases, or we have an integration with LaunchDarkly where you're able to create a feature flag console. So the use cases for this external resources feature are like just limited to your imagination.
Okay, yeah, sounds
But
interesting.
yeah, but let me now touch upon the part where Terraform fits into this flow. So if you remember, I was talking about the Octeto YAML file where you can configure all this automation for your environments. And before that, you see I have a simple Terraform file where I've just configured how this bucket gets created. Now, if you were to create this resource manually, you would have to apply like have Terraform installed locally on developers' machines, have them run Terraform commands, and if things go wrong, they would have to debug it. But with the help of Octeto, you're able to extract all of that and just put it in a configuration. So you see here, I create the bucket name from my Octeto namespace, which ensures that each bucket has like a unique name. And then all I do is run the Terraform commands, which you would run to create infrastructure in production or as part of any CI/CD pipeline. The benefit is that all of this gets abstracted away from developers, so they don't need to have Terraform knowledge. And this runs in a container on the cluster where you have Octeto installed. So they don't even need Terraform installed on their machines. They don't even need to know about Terraform or have any knowledge. So this abstraction you are able to provide developers and this automation is where the power of, I think, combining Terraform and Octeto lies. If you would like to know more about how this application has been configured, I won't go into the details, but we have a video which we'll share with you in the follow-up email, which will have all the steps for this.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I can definitely see that that would help as well with building. Like if you have a subject matter expert in Terraform or a group of people that are really good at that, they can build components that other developers can leverage without having to fully upskill in that area. It's probably quite a good way to
Yeah.
collaborate with your other workers essentially.
And one of the things we have been talking, I see a lot of people talking more and more in the industry is like the cognitive load on developers and the developer experience. And all of this gets like, it comes down to the fact that you cannot expect a single person to be an expert in everything, right? If you have like a front end developer or even a full stack developer, their knowledge is specific to their domain. You cannot just go to them today and ask that, hey, I want you to learn about Kubernetes, AWS, Terraform, because our application now uses a storage bucket and you need to create that bucket whenever you develop. That's just not practical, and that leads to a frustrating experience for developers. So this whole idea of platform engineering, which is being built around that you need to treat your developers as your users, as your customers, is something I feel is going to be a game changer for our industry in general. So let me hand it over to you so you can talk a bit more about your demo and what you have built for us
Sure.
today.
Okay. Thanks, Ash. Yeah. So basically, so what did I do? Sorry, one second. I guess if we go back to the
I
slides,
have my
Ash.
slides here.
Yeah. If we go back to the slides for, yeah, perfect. So, so in my, in my wanderings on the web, I happened to be looking at Octeto and thinking, oh wow, Octeto is a pretty cool product, and I know some of the people that work at Octeto from my past experiences. So I was just interested to see how it works, and I had to play with it. And I was thinking, you know what? There's two ways you can integrate Terraform with Octeto. One is what you've shown us already with your external components, which allows um, customers to leverage existing investment in Terraform that they've already built. The other option is to use Terraform to actually drive Octeto. And so if you treat Octeto as a provider, like a cloud provider, then we can use Terraform to drive Octeto resources. So again, in my spare time, I thought, hey, it'd be fun to create a provider for Octeto. Let's see what we can do. And I always like to, I'm always on a journey to try and learn as much as I can about, especially particularly Hushy products. So I thought, hey, let's try to build a provider for Octeto. And so, what did I actually build? I built and registered an Octeto provider in the Terraform registry. So we can jump to the registry here. I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
So what that means is that I published a version of Octeto provider to the registry, which means anyone can use it. It's fully open source. You can see here that it's already had a chunky amount of downloads, so that's interesting. It's probably mostly people from Octeto, I think. And again, this is hosted on GitHub, so anyone can go there and take a look. The information is in here around how to build it, how to use it, and how to run it. So what does it actually do? So basically, my thinking was, let's try to basically move one step further away. So if you're trying to build, so again, we're talking about GitOps, and we're talking about maybe building capability to enable developers more quickly. So can we get Okteto spun up with the configuration that you're talking about? Um, and so what I thought I'd do is I'd say, hey, look, let's try the sample Okteto. It is hard to say, so we'll try the sample Okteto app, and we'll see if we can automate that using Terraform. And so what I did, just to kind of paint the picture, is um, I cloned your sample application, and that's
Let's
sitting.
just call it to-do list app for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rest
your
of the
sample
webinar.
application to do the to do sample app, and this is it here. So this is what it looks like, and so it's exactly the same, except for a modification for the TF backend. But basically, this is the actual to-do application, and and then what I did was I created the Okteto Terraform provider. So if we go back to the Terraform provider for Okteto, and you can see here that this is the provider. Again, anyone can come here and have a look. But I just thought I'd quickly show you that I created a number of resources. So this means that I can create a pipeline, which is in Okteto. We'll see the pipeline in a minute. I can also create a secret, because um, we need secrets to be able to connect to AWS or to connect to other providers, perhaps. And so we need those secrets. And to be able to deploy this automatically, I need to be able to deploy the secrets. So okay, so let's get into what this looks like. So here's my Okteto console. It's completely empty. I have nothing in here at all. Just to let you know, even from a secrets perspective, that's not correct. One second. Okay, so there's no secrets, and there's nothing in my Okteto console today. So what we'll do is we will. Can you still see my screen, Ash?
Yep, I can see your screen.
Great. Okay. So what we'll do is I'm sitting here in the Terraform demo folder, which is again actually very quickly. So the Terraform demo folder contains a little bit of Terraform, and so what this looks like again is there's a main file which basically has two providers. One is AWS and one is Okteto. This is the new provider that I've just published to the registry. And what I do is I actually create an IAM user in AWS. So it's called Okteto deploy. So this user gets created with the correct permissions required to deploy the Okteto application, which in this case is to mainly create. This is including all the things that are required in all three tiers. And then this is the secrets. So then after I've created the IAM user, I go back to Okteto to create the secrets based on this new user. So these credentials are essentially created specifically for this deployment. And you can see that it's being handled here. And so that basically the secret key is being created into, and the region is being set into Okteto. And we'll see that in a minute. And finally, there's a pipeline resource. And what this pipeline resource does is all it does is creates the pipeline pointing to the Git repository of the application I want to deploy, and it has a bunch of dependencies to make sure that things get created in the right order. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty clear. We'll give it a plan, and we'll see what it looks like. So again, this is that same folder, and I'm going to run a Terraform plan. Okay, so this plan is going to add 13 things, and we can see here that it's going to add Okteto secrets, it's going to create the Okteto pipeline, and it's going to do some IAM user in AWS. And just before we run that, maybe what I'll do is just quickly show you my AWS environment. Yeah, slow. Okay, so I've got an Okteto user, but that's not the user we're creating. We're creating a new one called Okteto deploy. We'll see that in a second. So here we go. Let's give it a try. Okay, let's go. All right, so the first thing it's doing is it's creating that IAM user. So if we go over to here, um, here we go. The Okteto deploy user is already being created. If we hop over to the Okteto console, we'll start to see that it's already provisioning that, or it's creating that pipeline, and it's deploying those components, the exact same thing that you did essentially from the console. So we'll give this a second. It takes a couple of minutes to run. So while that's running, we can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I think we have like just to give a summary of what's happening and what has happened before. I think the demo I showed was about how you can leverage Terraform as part of your Octado flow to automate the infrastructure creation. Now, to do that, like to create that bucket, I had manually created the AWS user and added the credentials. What Richard is showing is how you can automate that process of creating that user via Terraform and then deploying your application as well. So my demo was like Octado abstracting away Terraform, and Richard's demo is more about Terraform abstracting away the installation bits about Octado, which you need to get that demo working. And this is not an either or option. So with the flexibility that Octado provides, you can do both. So you can have Terraform, which automates deploying Octado and creating the secrets, and then you can have that Octado installation creating the S3 bucket or any other resource you want. So you can go full inception and do whatever cool stuff you'd like to do here.
Yeah, I must admit this is it's properly in the matrix really because it's Terraform deploying to Terraform,
Yeah.
or Terraform deploying Okteto deploying Terraform. And I guess again here what we can see is, so this is completed by the way. So we can see here that the secrets were created as part of, again, it looks like that one needs to be refreshed. So the secrets were created as part of that Terraform deploy, and um, this is actually completed. So we can, again, you can see here this is the skyscraper to-do list. So
And this URL is like different from the one I had for my
yeah,
application.
just checking that everyone understands that
Yeah. This is
there's nothing
live.
up the
Like,
screen. This is working. So yeah, and again, what we can even click here to go directly to the bucket. So you can see the bucket here. Nothing's saved. Um, what should I do today? Do nothing. Do nothing, or maybe do little. Okay. So if I save that, then we'll see this file turns up. So yeah, it's pretty cool actually to see all that orchestrate without, to make that work without having to do much other than trigger that pipeline was actually quite interesting. I was quite surprised that it all worked. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but I was. And again, so
yeah.
let's, the other bit again is a destroy. So essentially, similarly, if you had, you wanted to essentially lifecycle manage maybe a instance in Okteto, it's possible to do it this way too. So at some point in the future, let's say 6 months from now, or a monthly lease or something on a pipeline, so we can run a destroy. And again, this will do the opposite. So here we go. We're going to destroy 13 things. And if we go over here, we'll see
And
that.
this is something you can do via the UI as well. So it really is a matter of choice in how you want to do these things. And what this will do is it will not only destroy the Octeto environment, but it will also destroy the S3 bucket in this case or any other cloud resources in your case. Because at the end of the day, all we are doing is just automating and abstracting running that Terraform script and just taking that complexity of dealing with Terraform from developers and just letting them focus on being able to write code and being able to ship value.
Absolutely. And again, yeah, because this is running a Terraform destroy right now, the S3 bucket will disappear. Here we go. It's about to be destroyed. And once that's completed, still destroying, still destroying. I'll get there in a second. Here we go. Just done. So that's about to be finished. That's completely cleaned up. And so this will pretty much now roll into whatever's left. So it's removing the AWS IAM user and it's removing the Octeto secrets. So what we'll see here again is if we go to secrets, probably have to refresh this again. Yeah.
Yep, all magic. That was a pretty cool demo, Richard. Thank you for working on that and thank you for sharing that with us today.
No
So,
problem.
to sum up, we in this webinar we saw what Terraform does and what's the value of having an infrastructure as code tool and leveraging it. And then we later saw how all these tools, which we as DevOps people or as platform engineers use, and developers don't really care a lot about, how Octeto can help automate and abstract away those complexities and spin up development environments so that you can let your developers focus on what they do best, which is writing code, and you can take care of these like complexities away. So in like there's this term which I really like called like providing golden paths to developers, and what that refers to is that you have a path which is like super easy to follow for developers to get them where they want, instead of having to run to different places, learn about different tools, install different tools, because all of these things like they add to your cognitive load as a developer, and you want to be able to abstract that away from your team.
Yeah, 100% agree with the golden, well, should we say the multiple golden paths?
Yeah.
What I'm seeing with customers is there isn't really one option that
It really
is.
depends on like your organization's need, right? There's no like one true way for everyone.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I did also put together a TFC demo, but maybe I don't know if we've got time to show it. But basically, if we wanted to see, if you wanted to add approval mechanisms into that workflow, then that's also something that's possible by basically just launching that same Terraform environment with Terraform Cloud. Um, so basically, yeah, I think the golden path is a really interesting one. I do think that if you're tasked with providing developers a good experience and you need to spin up a lot of Octeto pipelines for those developers on their behalf, maybe to get them started quickly, that's a good use case for this Terraform integration, essentially. However, if the option was to just allow people access to Octeto and let them drive it directly,
Yeah.
then being able to put Terraform into those pipelines is also a super cool use case. So I do like both options.
Yeah. And with this, we are about to reach the end for our webinar. Before we close, Richard, would you like to just talk about what Skyscraper does, or where people can follow you or ask you about any questions they might have about the demo?
Sure, yeah. So Skyscraper is basically a services organization that helps customers um, build and manage Terraform providers. Like I said, quality is definitely an important part. So it's not technically difficult to build a provider, but it's fairly heavy burden to ongoing maintain and make sure that it's meeting the kind of ongoing standards, which keep changing as time goes on. So Skyscraper is really there to help customers who want to build providers. And so if there's anyone who's out there thinking, hey, we could use a provider for our tool, or I'd love to learn to create a provider, or how is that done? Then feel free to reach out to me on Richard at skyscraper.io. Skyscraper spelled
We have
SKYSCR.
banners on the console so people can
Okay,
see
great.
that.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
perfect.
basically, feel free to reach out, and happy to chat about anything provider to anyone. Um, so yeah, thanks for the opportunity to have a chat today.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you for joining in for our webinar today. I hope you found this useful and learned something new about Terraform, Okteto, or just like best practices in general. Um, if you found this interesting, I would encourage you to try this out yourself and schedule a demo call with us. Like you can click the button you see. And if you're stuck anywhere in the process, if you go to our website, you can schedule a demo call and one of our Octado experts will hop on the call and help you try this out. So try it out for yourself, book a demo with us, and hopefully you'll be able to deliver a amazing experience to the developers on your team. If people are interested, we can stick around and just have a lounge session where people can talk to us or ask questions. Or if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. We are here for a couple of more minutes and then we can wrap up, I think.
So what's up for the rest of the day, Ash? What's going on in Okteto land in India?
uh, for my rest of the day, it's pretty late here, so I'm just gonna crash. But yeah, we are excited to be shipping some cool features, which I can't really talk about right now. But it has been an interesting year for us so far because, like external resources, the feature we talked about here has been like one of my personally favorite features, and I can see myself like using this so much had this type of tooling existed earlier. So interesting things going on. What about you? Any interesting projects you're creating providers for?
Yeah, I mean, so this whole provider thing started because I was working at a bank. Well, I can probably say I was working at NAB in Australia, and we were trying to integrate. So it's actually funny because we come back to what you said before around provider being an entry point into a customer's environment. So a Terraform support essentially being an entry point. And if you are looking for automation, basically, if there's this is where again Terraform really wins, right? Because people think of infrastructure as code, and a lot of people think it's really about cloud and infrastructure, and it is. But there's also other tooling that needs to integrate with your environment that also needs to be
Exactly.
automated.
Yeah.
So I built a provider for NAB called for Cloudability, and it's an official provider for Cloudability. It's used by Cloudability themselves now. Um, and then I've also built a provider for OpenAI. So if anyone wants to, everyone wants to orchestrate fine tuning on OpenAI, that's there's a provider for that too. Um, and as when I was working at AWS, I did a lot of provider contributions to the AWS Terraform provider. So that's basically
Yeah.
been, I don't know,
The
the,
biggest provider, the scariest
yeah,
provider of them all.
a knee-deep black hole for
Yeah.
providers for the last few.
Yeah, but maybe now that you have your Chat GPT provider, you can just use that to create all your other providers. Just train it on the providers, a provider to create providers. Now that would be like
I
going
was
full
thinking,
meta.
I was thinking when you mentioned removing cognitive load. If you didn't mention AI, I was thinking you're doing well. Probably every single person who's in an event is going to mention the word AI, Gen AI, AI, ML. So I'm surprised you didn't mention it, but good on you for not.
Yeah. Cool. Looks like we don't have any further questions, so we can just end this webinar now. And once again, thank you for everyone who joined, and I hope you found this session useful.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Ash. Thanks a lot, Okteto.
Yep. Thank you for joining us today.